Alright, back to working on the Naomi light gun game. Last thing was I have some gun calibration issues. I haven't looked into that yet, but what I am addressing now is the infrared emitters that are placed around the monitor, 5 on the top, 5 on the bottom. Now, this is an original monitor shroud that had the infrared emitters mounted in it. You can see the 2 bolt holes that they were mounted to, and then there were zip ties holding the cable that connects each of the sensors together. 5 across the top, then a long cable that went down to the bottom, and 5 across the bottom. So I've used this as kind of a pattern for what I've made here. And here we have sensors and wires mounted on a homemade deal, which I thought I would describe. What this is some foam core that I got from an art store and some mat board from an art store. Now, normally the mat board I get is solid core black, which means it's black all the way through. They were out of that, so I had to get the stuff that is black on one side, white throughout, and then white on the back. But as this is just, mocking up for this gun cabinet, I don't really care. So where I cut holes, you can see the inside of the mat board is white. I could paint that black if I wanted to. I'm also using M3 metric screws, which is what the original used. I could have got those in black, or I could paint them black. But again, this whole project is trying to see if I can get this thing to work and verify what parts I have that are working and what parts aren't. So here you see the finished top bar with 5 sensors on it. So the first thing you've got is, and I've started working on the bottom piece, is the mat board. I cut it 36-inch wide because the foam core I got was 36-inch long. What I should have probably done is glued 2 pieces of the foam core together. And I probably might have had to glue also some of the mat board to make it the same width as the television to make it look a little bit better. It's a few inches shorter on each side from the television. But again, it's whatever. I'm just trying to get this thing hooked up and see if I can get it working. So the first thing I did was I cut a 36-inch piece by 1.5-inch tall piece of mat board. I then found the midway point of 36 inches. Okay. Then I figured out the size of my screen horizontally and cut that into fourths. So basically, this sensor will be right at the right-hand edge of the screen. This one is in the middle, and this one is in between the 2, so they're all equal distant apart. I used, again, the original monitor shroud. After marking the midpoint, 7/8 from either end of 1 3/4. And then by eye, I just placed the original monitor shroud, tried to line the center of the X with the center of the cutout for the sensor, and that's where I drew it. So here's what one of the sensors looks like. This is one that I just pulled off. It's not clean. If you can, I don't know if you can see with the shadows that they're fairly dirty. So I've been cleaning them with Novus before I install them. So behind the mat board goes one of these sensors, which you'll also notice you might notice that the screw holes are not in the middle of this plastic. They're a little bit off. So when I go to make my holes for the screws, I have to remember not to make them on the center line. So what I did was I lined this up at an approximate distance from the top and bottom that I liked, and then marked both of the holes. The way I punched the holes out, trying to get the holes about the same diameter as the originals so the screws would go through without having to cut a circle, because it's, you can see the jagged results here using an X-Acto knife to carve that big oval. This is fairly thick stuff. Try to carve a little tiny circle like that that's just the right size, that won't need some big washer to cover up the hole and make the screws actually hold. So what I found out, my wife came up with the idea of, can you use a nail? And I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. And I took it one step further, and I have this, call it a nail punch or nail set. It's an old one I had from father-in-law's estate. And basically these are made for punching a nail head, a finished nail head, into the wood. So say you're doing something with wood that you don't want the nail to be seen, you hammer the nail in till it's flush with the wood. You put this over the nail and hit it, and it knocks the nail slightly into the wood. Then you can put some wood putty over the hole, prime it and paint it, and you don't see a nail head sticking out. So you can see here that it's actually got a small indentation that fits over that finished nail head, and then knocks it in. So what I did was, after I had marked where my holes were, I took the mat board and I put it on this piece of particle board, and I put this over the hole and smacked it with the hammer. I actually had it face down like that. Smacked it with the hammer, and what you get is right here. It actually punched a small circle of that mat board right into this particle board here, and made a nice, perfectly clean round hole. So no jagged edges that you would get if you tried to use an X-Acto and make a really small hole, or make an X shape that you could poke it through. This actually made a nice clean hole all the way through that turned out was just perfect for the threads of these screws to go through, and I didn't need to use a washer because the heads are acting to spread the weight out, so it's not going to pull through the paper. So it's just the perfect size. Looks like 3/32 of an inch. Nail punch, nail set. So that got me my holes for the bolts, and I described how I made the holes for the sensors. And if we turn this over, the foam core I put in there to give thickness, because originally I was thinking, okay, well, I need something so that these aren't touching the TV, scratching up the TV. So I thought of foam core, so that's what I used. But you can see I wasn't thinking about the wires. So that's the one big issue I have right now is that the foam core is adding structural support, but I still need to find a way to make this rest up against the TV. So I was going to make a U-channel, just have another piece, thicker piece across the top here, and probably go about that far back, and then another piece that goes down. So this whole thing slides up and on top of the TV and rests on the TV. An issue with that is the heat from the TV goes through some vent holes in the top of the TV. So this would basically make it get way too hot inside the TV because the heat wouldn't be able to come out. So now I'm thinking of just making 3 U channels, one in the middle and one on either end, and have that hanging over the TV so that it won't get too hot, but it'll still be able to hang over the TV so that the wires and everything, which you'll notice I made it worse for myself with these zip ties holding the wires down. That added a lot of height there. But it shouldn't matter how far this is sticking away from the TV set because it's triangulating based on the camera in the gun reads the infrared coming off of the LEDs here. So, you know, it's not 3D. It's not going on the Z axis. It's just triangulating on the X and Y axis. So it should be fine if it's sticking out from the TV a little bit. And again, this isn't like a production, you know, I'm going to manufacture this and sell it. This is a see if I can get this thing running, play through the games, determine, you know, what parts I have in my Naomi gun setup that are working and what aren't. And so I could have done that the way I had this set up with blue tape holding the sensors on, but the sensors are just popping off, the blue tape's giving way. So I really wanted to make something a little bit sturdier that I could hang on the TV and it would support itself and would look a little bit better than a bunch of blue tape sensors around the TV. So this is what I came up with. Again, it's probably way overkill. I could have come up with something simpler. But part 1 is done here with the upper 5 sensors. And then I need to do the exact same thing, make another one of these exactly the same for the 5 lower sensors. And then there's wires that go from the top of the screen down to the bottom of the screen to connect the sensors together. 4 of them, and then if I remember right, the top right wire comes out and goes to the 5th sensor that's on the lower section. So there's a string of 5 that go across the top, and then the bottom has 1 sensor that comes off of this side, and that's the end of the sensors, if that makes sense, because this is not a loop. So there's 1 sensor in the bottom right, then goes up to this one. They connect across each other. This one goes down back to the bottom of the screen, where it connects to 4 more sensors. That gives you your 10 sensors. And then off of that final sensor, it goes into the wiring harness that goes to the gun sensor board that hooks up to this and powers it. So, yeah, still working on it, but actually back to working on it after taking a break working on my Omega Race project that I finished, my Tempest monitor, which I just rebuilt and is now in the machine and working, and back to this project. So, hopefully, in the not-too-distant future, I'll get the other one of these set up and then figure how I'm going to hang them all on the television set and get them all wired up, and then back to working on actually figuring out what my gun calibration issue is. So just a little update if anybody's thinking of doing something similar. Just thought I would talk about the nail punch that got me the perfect holes for these bolts and kind of show how the sensors, how they look. And how the filter material looks, which if you hold this up to a light, it's actually got a red tint to it. It looks gray, but it's actually got a red tint to it. It's kind of cool. So, yeah. That's about it for this video.